Something has been in our skies, and it's watching us to this day.
This morning, it's not deja vu, but a possible return of more drones.
We're seeing things in the sky that look like planes, and a lot of people are actually saying these are drones disguised as planes.
Thousands of reported sightings.
Something strange is going on. For some reason, they don't want to tell the people, and they should.
SUV-sized drones? How do you explain that part? You think people just get the size wrong, Ryan?
What if I told you these Jersey drone sightings are part of a pattern going back decades? And maybe centuries.
You're telling me we don't know what the hell these drones are in New Jersey are?
So I really want to talk about these drones that have been showing up, and some similar strange events in different areas around the world throughout history. So recently, in November and December of 2024, places like New Jersey and throughout the United States, and I guess even the world at this point, there's been some strange sightings of these drones randomly appearing each night. Now, there most likely is a rational explanation for these, but that hasn't stopped many from thinking that these might be just some type of government surveillance, a foreign attack, or even those pesky aliens. This is a bit of a different video than what I usually make. I'll probably be rambling a bit more in this one, so if you like it, please let me know and I'll make more of these. But yeah, let's continue. When I first heard about this, my thoughts on this were whether this has ever happened throughout history, where similar objects or phenomena have come almost out of nowhere and have shaken up towns, areas, and local residents. So after doing a bit of research here, I discovered, yeah, there definitely have been. There's been some crazy cases around the world in history, and yeah, let's talk about it today. I mean, I think it's going to be pretty interesting to kind of go through it. So just a quick disclaimer though. To be honest, I think that the New Jersey drones are going to be considered some kind of mass hysteria event once it's all kind of settled and I don't know, we get our answers and whatnot. But let's be honest, a vast majority of these sightings are planes, other people's drones flying in the air, government drones, or even stars and planets. If I had to guess, it would probably be around like 90 to 95% of sightings that fit in this sort of criteria. But at the same time, I think it's honestly disrespectful to make fun of these local residents as being dumb or not looking up in the sky enough to see these sightings. People can obviously tell that there's something strange going on, and there likely is something more to it. Is it aliens or some ocean creature or something? Probably not. But regardless, I will try to be as respectful in this video as possible. This isn't really a video on the New Jersey drones. It's more on some strange events in terms of towns or areas going through similar events like this throughout history, because I think it would be pretty interesting to talk about this. Also, once again, I'm not endorsing aliens here, as I always consider it as a last resort theory. Okay, but we honestly, let me speak to you guys right now. We know these are aliens. I need to say that to stay a little bit credible. Okay, but seriously though, guys, I don't think a lot of people are talking about the historical strangeness, similarities, and frequency of these types of events. And it kind of gives me an excuse to talk about some of these because I've been wanting to for quite a while, and I haven't been able to find a reason until now. Before we start though, I'm sure there are plausible answers for these events, and feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. I'm not saying all these events are just this crazy phenomenon, but what I am going to say is that a lot of these events have had some weird mystery or kind of mystique behind it, and so that's the reason why I'm talking about them today. So let's take a trip down memory lane and back into our history. So let's begin. There have been early strange sightings throughout recorded history of odd anomalies in the sky. This includes the shields in the sky in Rome in the year 218 BCE, where countless witnesses in Rome saw a group of shiny round shields of polished bronze flying through the sky. There was also the strange and infamous Tully Papyrus in ancient Egypt in the year 1480 BCE, with the story of a fiery disc-shaped object being in the sky. The Tully Papyrus is full of controversy because the known copy of the papyrus was actually just a copy or a transcription of the original, so we can't confirm if it's legitimate at this point. I believe that the original copy has been lost or it's, hidden away or something. There's also the 1609 UFO turmoil in Korea, where flying halo or washbowl-like objects were witnessed in multiple counties in the country. There's several other cases throughout our early history as well, and honestly, I could spend hours and hours going through each one. But we're actually going to start in the year 1561. In Nuremberg, which is in modern-day Germany, there was a strange event that occurred in the city that was printed in the news in the same month. You see, at this time in history, there weren't just newspapers being given to every person in the town. Instead, there were these broadsheets that would be printed and placed in the town square, or it was shared in other ways for the community. Hans Glaser published the strange account that happened in 1561. So I'm not going to read out the entire passage, and I'll just instead explain kind of the interpretation of what happened here. But if you want to read the translated version, I'll leave it linked below. On April 14th, 1561, between 4 and 5 in the morning, there was an apparition seen near the sun in Nuremberg. First, there were 2 blood-red semicircular arcs seen near the sun in the sky, looking similar to a quarter moon. Suddenly, all these orbs started forming around the sun. Some were red, and others were darker or even black. Some would move in a straight line, but others would be flying around without any specific pattern of movement. Also, when seen closer, they were all different shapes. Some were rods or cigar-shaped, some globes, and some even looked like crosses. Apparently, they could be seen zipping around at each other for over an hour, and it looked like they were fighting with each other. There were many of these objects that crashed down and burned up, leaving little to nothing behind, except a trail of smoke. After all this, there was a long and thick black spear seen in the sky. The shaft of the spear was pointed to the east, and the point was pointed west. So, imagine if you're just a farmer or something in 1561, and you see a space war between orbs, crosses, and cigar-shaped objects in the sky, with a huge black spear at the end. I wonder what they were thinking. They must have been absolutely freaking out. But honestly, I would have been freaking out at the sparking sun. Look at that sun, it looks so menacing. But anyways, let's continue. So initially, a few theories on this are that these could have been wildfires or sundogs. Sundogs look something like this, and so this has been a theory on these events. But the thing is, sundogs have been reported on broadsheets before, as seen here, and so it's likely that they knew what sundogs were at that point. And so I don't believe in that theory. Also, one thing that really annoys me is that there's always this idea that people from the past just had no idea about anything. Like if there's a sundog in the sky, that they would have automatically thought that it was like the apocalypse or something. I get that people might have known a little less than us when it comes to certain things today, but I don't think it's as extreme as it's made out to be. Maybe it could have been a volcanic explosion nearby, but that likely would have been noted somewhere too. The orb zipping around is really interesting too. The only scientific explanation that I can think of is that they were staring at the sun too long maybe. Which I definitely don't recommend. Like maybe the sun looked a little strange one day and everyone just started looking up, and then because they were staring at the sun too long, they started seeing these things in their vision because their eyes were getting damaged. I don't know. But even then, like, they would know what that is. They would know like that's a bad idea. So, that's what I can think of initially. Also, if it was forest fires, it's not like the locals would not have known about these as well at the time. If you look at how a sun looks during a forest fire, you'll see that it kind of looks a little bit odd, and it might have fit kind of the description of what was seen on that day. I think that might be one of the closest ones, or some kind of volcanic explosion or something, but I don't know. That might be it. But anyways, let's continue. So yeah, as you can see here, the description is very odd. And could it have been something more? I think it definitely could have been. It freaked out the people in the town for sure. And the strange sightings and battles in the sky and the orbs definitely reminded me of some of the strange sights that are happening around the world today. Something I find absolutely fascinating though is how these different types of sightings are interpreted. In 1561, because of the absolute rule of the church at the time, these sightings were seen as a punishment from God for the sins of the people. Today, due to technological advancement, many strange sightings are just seen as technology or drones or planes or along those lines, which shows that these strange sightings occur regardless, but depending on the time period, the interpretation is always different. History and current events can only be seen in the lens of the society it's in, and even though the interpretations are different, the events can be similar across time. Whether it's mass hysteria, sundogs, forest fires, or UFOs, the Nuremberg sightings were definitely strange and were an early recorded part of history that we're lucky to try to interpret in our own tinfoil hat kind of ways. So this wasn't the only sighting in Europe at the time, because only 5 years later, there was something else strange that happened. 5 years later, in the year 1566, in the town of Basel in Switzerland, there were also some pretty similar strange events that happened, including the damn sun having a face again. Seriously though, on July 27th, 28th, and August 7th, there were reports of 3 strange events in the sky. Once again, I'll link the translated account below, but I'll summarize it here. As there obviously weren't telescopes, cameras, or weather apps back then, they described it as the following. On July 27th and 28th, the sun began to shrink and it lost its bright glow. Then it turned a blood red color and the sky became dark. People said it looked like the sky was crying tears of blood. The moon also turned red, similar to a blood moon during a lunar eclipse. On August 7th, at sunrise, people began seeing big black spheres flying around the sky. They were darting back and forth and almost looked like they were fighting each other. Some spheres were on fire and broke apart and disappeared, just like what happened in Nuremberg 5 years prior. This freaked out the locals, who could do nothing but just watch the show unfold. Here's the thing. During this time, it's not like today where there's aircraft, drones, or all this aerial phenomena in the air. It's really strange that this happened on 3 completely different days within a 2-week period. Could this have just been some sort of terrible forest fire? Or even a sundog, as we talked about earlier? Some people online think so, but I don't think it's a sundog. Like I said earlier, it's like they knew what sundogs were from what we can interpret, but it doesn't seem like it's that. The forest fire one makes more sense to me. I think it could have been a forest fire or even a volcanic explosion, because the sun definitely does turn red or like a different color when that happens. So I think that's the closest scientific answer I can think of. Regardless of how the sun looked, I definitely found the spheres darting back and forth and battling in the sky as being definitely strange. These 2 similar events happening within a 5-year period is definitely odd, and the interpretations of these events were quite similar. It makes me wonder if this occurred in other towns or areas at the time, where there weren't as many resources to record something like this. Because these 2 towns were lucky enough to have someone to be able to record these onto the broadsheets or just kind of have it written down somewhere, but how much of the history of these types of events happening were lost to time, or maybe hidden away, or maybe like because of the church or because of any other groups were kind of taken away to prevent any kind of questions and whatnot. But also they might have happened in areas where they just weren't recording it at the time. Like these are the 2 that we know of, but there's definitely more out there. There has to be, just based on statistical probability. It's something to think about for sure. It's a bit tough to find specific accounts from several hundred years ago, but these 2 definitely stand out. Regardless, let's continue with our next case, 100 years into the future. In 1665, there was a strange sighting in Stralsund, Germany. The story goes that on April 8, 1665, 6 fishermen fishing for herring were having a relaxing day, but that relaxing day was about to end very quickly. Suddenly, they saw a bunch of warships in the sky engaged in a loud and thunderous battle. Once they saw this, they quickly got back to shore and got the heck out of there. Later that evening, locals saw a flat round shape like a plate hovering above the church of St. Nicholas. I'm assuming that it looked very menacing. The news of this spread like wildfire in the area and was reported almost immediately. There were many people that believed it was God's wrath again, and others who had no idea what it could be. But I'm sure they had some interesting theories. More people thought it was God's wrath when 5 years later, in 1670, lightning struck the exact spot where the craft was seen 5 years earlier, on top of the church of St. Nicholas. So that probably got a few people closer to their faith at that point. Some of the pictures that were drawn regarding the event and other similar events from that period are very strange. And honestly, it looks like something that would make any UFO enthusiast lose their minds today. It's really interesting to see the similarities between the crafts seen hundreds of years ago and some of the sightings today. Also, like I said earlier, it's really interesting to see the interpretation of these events as God's wrath, instead of today using other explanations for potential strange crafts in the sky. For these 3 sightings, one of the interesting side theories that I read online was that some people believe that this could have been some type of time slip kind of situation. So basically what it is that there were airplanes fighting during World War II, and maybe there was like some kind of time slip where local residents hundreds of years ago could have seen this happen in the sky. And they would have interpreted it as warships when it could have just been planes fighting. That's a pretty interesting theory, to be honest. I don't know. It's definitely something that is out of the realm of scientific possibility and understanding at this point, but it's pretty interesting in my opinion. And it would be something interesting, honestly, to explore further. And I honestly don't know much about these types of time slips or similar ones that have occurred. But if you want me to look more into it and other potential time slips throughout history, please let me know in the comments below, and I can definitely do some digging or investigation. Regardless, all 3 sightings are incredibly odd, and they're a forgotten part of our history. Maybe these experiences from our history can help explain some of the strange stuff happening today. But regardless, they are fascinating cases, and the interpretation of events could definitely go many different ways. Do I think these are all aliens? Absolutely not. But I do think that there's some level of strangeness to these cases. Anyways, let's move on. In the late 1800s, there were a bunch of reports in the United States of these mysterious airships floating around. At the time, they were called mystery airships, or phantom airships. What a name. A majority of these sightings were of a light or group of lights flying in the sky, but others had more specific accounts. For example, at the time, many believed that it looked almost like an airship or even a blimp. But this was before these types of craft were popularized or even used in the United States. These craft weren't even in the States at this time, and wouldn't be for at least another decade. I'm gonna be honest with you, I've always wanted to kind of ride in a blimp. I guess they still exist, but there's only a few left, right? I think, I don't know, for some reason I've always found them fascinating, and I've never really seen one in the sky before, but yeah, they look incredible. I don't know. I know there's been some disasters as well, but let's not talk about those. Honestly, if I ever get the opportunity, I would love to do it. So these sightings of these mystery airships weren't just in one town or area. Apparently, thousands of people saw these airships, and some claim that up to 100,000 people witnessed them. And that also depends, like some of them saw them from far away, like up as just lights, and some even had encounters with the people in these airships, as we'll see shortly. There were even some people or some newspapers that called them the mystic flying lights. I guess to just add that little kind of oomph to it, make it a little bit spookier. A vast majority of these sightings were either in California or in the Midwest United States. But these sightings were also seen all throughout the country, and then they were also seen up in Canada as well. I mean, people said they saw them everywhere, so who knows what is exactly the case. The accounts of the shapes of the ships were also different. Some saw cigar-shaped ships with a small basket or canoe-shaped object attached. Others saw oblong or egg-shaped craft with wheels on it, or even metallic surfaced ships. There were also accounts of the ships having 2 wings or fan-like projections attached to the body. One of the strangest parts of these mystery airships were the encounters. For example, some anecdotes during this time include a story from November 17, 1896. On this day, residents of Sacramento, California observed a mysterious flying light at about 1,000 feet up. There was a witness named R.L. Lowry who reported hearing a voice in the mystery craft saying to go higher in order to avoid hitting the roof of the church. He described it as two men pedaling to power the craft, with a passenger compartment above them and a bright front light. Some witnesses even heard talking or singing as it passed. This here was an image that was drawn of the craft. It looks like something that an inventor would make and test out, and it was definitely ahead of its time. Another case was when 2 days later, on November 19th, Colonel H.G. Shaw reported encountering a metallic ruddered craft near Stockton in California. He described it as 25 feet wide and 150 feet long. Shaw claimed 3 7-foot-tall beings speaking in strange garbling noises tried to abduct him, but they lacked the strength to do so. Are you serious? There's no way this is true. I mean, it honestly sounds like he's trying to flex here. That he can fight off 3 7-foot-tall aliens? There's no chance, man. There's absolutely no chance. That's more unlikely than him actually meeting the aliens. Like, if he just said, oh, I met them and they went away, I think people might believe him more, but the fact that he's like, yeah, they can't do anything to me. Like, come on, look at me. Okay, anyways, the story goes that the aliens retreated to their craft, which sped away. Shaw believed the beings were Martians trying to abduct a human, which would make this one of the earliest abduction reports that we know of. This story was obviously unbelievable and likely a hoax, but I had to include it in the video. Come on, it's pretty interesting. Moving on November 22nd, the bright mystery light appeared again over Sacramento, and this was observed by the deputy sheriff and district attorney. Witnesses described it as twice as bright as an arc light. Over the next few days, it appeared over cities such as San Francisco, Oakland, and Modesto, so these were viewed by thousands, including the mayor of San Francisco and his staff. On November 29th, over 100 residents in Tulare, California, I think that's how you say it, I looked it up, I think you pronounce it Tulare, right? Anyone from that area can let me know? But yeah, anyways, over 100 Tulare residents reported seeing the airship with red, white, and blue lights. It descended briefly, and then it ascended again and sped away. Though the ship itself wasn't really visible, the lights definitely captured the attention of the local residents, and they watched it go until the lights disappeared. Sightings continued all throughout the United States and even into Canada well into 1897, but nobody took credit for these sightings. Many believed that these airships may have been secret inventions from some unknown genius who didn't publicly share this knowledge yet. If you think about it, this was the era of inventors, and who knows, maybe inventors like Nikola Tesla or Thomas Edison were flying around in these at some point, and no other inventors took credit for it, even years later. But there were people that kind of wanted to get in on this. For example, George D. Collins, who was a young lawyer from San Francisco, claimed that he was contacted by a man seeking legal advice regarding the first practical airship. But after the media hounded the guy, because of course they would, I mean, they've been seeing these ships and they were like, okay, we gotta see who this guy is. So they pretty much were like, hey, we're gonna ask you a bunch of questions on this. And he was like, you know what? Never mind. I don't know. So he pretty much said he made it up, or he went into hiding after. He just completely retracted his statement. There were also a few others that claimed to represent the inventor, but they all backed out of their claims pretty quickly once people asked them more than 1 or 2 questions about it. If this was the work of an inventor, maybe the inventor of these mystery airships crashed somewhere and lost their life as they were testing it out, and so they couldn't reveal their great invention. But my thoughts are that at some point in time, there definitely would have been some sort of interview, or someone would have recognized this person. Unless if they were really reclusive, which I guess could be a possibility. Maybe just some reclusive inventor in the mountains making airships, which honestly would be the plot of a really cool movie in my opinion. Regardless of what it is, it's definitely an odd case. It's really strange. If it's an inventor, or if it's mass hysteria, if it's, I don't know, UFOs, like, it's very odd. But regardless, if anyone tells you that Roswell was the first big UFO sighting in the States, they're lying to you. It was these mystery airships. One major issue, though, is that many newspapers at the time were printing sensationalist news articles to get the most shocking response. So how much of this was honestly true? But the counter-argument to that is that there were countless public sightings of these strange airships. So even though there was ridicule, that ridicule quieted pretty quickly. Eventually, the account of the mystery airships disappeared from memory and wasn't talked about until the 1960s, when UFO enthusiasts dug up these old newspaper articles. This actually reminds me a lot of the modern-day New Jersey drone sightings, in the sense that there may have been one or two strange sightings, but because everyone wanted to hop onto the story, it became muddied in the water a bit. But in the late 1800s, there were newspapers that were kind of exaggerating at times in order to get the best possible story. Mass-produced newspapers were still a relatively new thing at the time, and so it might have almost just been like a social media situation where there was a ton of misinformation, where everyone was just trying to get clickbait to get the best possible story. Some good old-fashioned 1800s clickbait. But the only thing is that apparently many local residents saw this, so maybe some of it wasn't clickbait? With the amount of witnesses and strange stories, there definitely might be something more here, although it's unlikely that it's 7-foot-tall lanky Martians. It could be just some crazy inventor in the mountains, or, I don't know, some project that was happening at the time. I have no idea. What do you think happened here? So I covered the Warminster thing more in depth in my previous Christmas Mysteries video, and I'll leave a link to that in the description below, as well as right up top here. But let's continue. On Christmas Day in 1964, the town of Warminster really went through it. In the middle of the night, many residents reported large sounds and booms on their roofs or above their house, as well as a persistent humming sound. And no, even though it was Christmas, it wasn't Santa. For example, resident Mildred Head heard sounds of the roof of her house that were similar to twigs brushing the tiles, and they only got louder and louder until it sounded like giant hailstones. Eventually, Mildred got out of bed to look out the window, but found nothing there. The night sky was clear, and there was no hail, rain, or crazy winds. She did hear a humming sound that grew louder and louder before suddenly fading to a faint whisper. Even soldiers at the nearby Nook Camp Army Base were awoken by the sound of something similar to a huge chimney stack ripped up from the rooftop and scattered across the whole camp. So they were just going about their day, and they heard a bunch of roofs of houses go up in the air and come crashing down. I mean, I personally would definitely freak out at that noise. I can't even imagine how that would sound. That's crazy. Throughout 1965, there were many strange events, such as an entire flock of pigeons dying in the town. And later in the year, UFOs started to show up, just right on time, right on cue. Specifically, they were described as being cigar-shaped and covered with winking bright lights. Some described it as twin red-hot pokers hanging downwards, one on top of the other, with a black space in between. There were so many sightings of this that Warminster quickly became the unofficial UFO capital of the UK during that time. After several sightings and strange events, and countless locals, travelers, just everyone claiming to witness these UFOs, eventually the hype calmed down, and the era of UFO sightings in Warminster eventually ended. Some people think that these sightings are because of how close Warminster is to Stonehenge, as it's approximately a 30-minute drive away. And some consider Stonehenge as being a UFO hotspot as well. That's a whole separate thing there. Regardless, the strange sounds and flying objects in the sky was something that was seen and heard by many residents in Warminster in the mid-1960s. So my thoughts on this when I read the story was that it was maybe military activity, just because of how close it is to the bases. There's probably something going on there, but a lot of people claim no, it was something just out of this world. So you got kind of a bit of a debate going on here between two groups that believe that it's incredibly strange, and then people just saying, hey, it's probably the military doing weird stuff. The Warminster thing was something that really caught my eye when I was researching it. It's really strange, and yeah, I don't know what it is. So for now, it remains unsolved. Throughout the 1980s, there were sightings of a circular arc of lights in the Hudson Valley in New York and Connecticut. Now this one definitely sounds familiar to some of the events happening in the modern day. So these lights absolutely baffled locals as residents started reporting these objects. The formation of these lights were in a V-shape, arc, or circle, and were constantly moving and changing. There were also some strange UFO sightings. For example, at the Indian Point nuclear power plant, several guards reported seeing a 900-foot UFO hovering over the plant for a short period of time. How they determined it was 900 feet, I honestly have no idea. Other residents saw similar boomerang-shaped crafts that didn't make any noise and moved slowly. If you look up the Hudson Valley UFO wave, you'll see countless experiences, or not see, why am I saying see? You'll read countless experiences of people who either knew a family member or they even experienced it themselves. Regardless, many of these sightings were later determined to be a hoax. For example, many of the sightings were believed to be these pilots flying Cessna 152s in tight formation. As their lights could change color, that would be the explanation for these sightings. I think it was a combination of like private pilots and commercial pilots, because it's an area where there's a lot of airports as well, so maybe it's just people saw planes and they thought it was UFOs, but anyways, let's continue. This reminds me a lot actually of the New Jersey drones today, in the sense that there may have been some strange sightings, but they've been kind of muddied by hoaxes, false sightings, and maybe even pranks. This case is one of the most similar historical examples, also because of the proximity. It's kind of in the same region of the United States. It also shows that these cases were happening even over 40 years ago. But there are also many that believe that this is just a cover-up story, and that Hudson Valley was home to a ton of strange UFO sightings that still happen today. Some of these sightings even continued into the 90s, and even the modern day, so people still see these every once in a while, but I think specifically, if I remember correctly, it's mostly in the early 1980s as well. My hunch is there's definitely something stranger here. I don't know exactly what it is, but this is one of those cases where I don't know if I agree with the official answer. I don't know, maybe I'm putting my tinfoil hat on here, but it's definitely a strange one, for sure. Could there be a similar result to the New Jersey drones case as well? Honestly, probably. I think it'll be something similar. Alright, so let's move on to some more modern day sightings. From November of 1989 to April of 1990, there were a ton of reports of these triangular, low-flying objects with lights underneath them in Belgium. And these crafts were moving at unnatural speeds. Does that sound familiar? But in all seriousness, this actually terrified local residents to the point where the Belgian Air Force needed to intervene. Initially, in November of 1989, 2 police officers were on a routine patrol when they saw a triangular-shaped craft with bright lights in the sky. The lights were in each corner of the triangular craft, and there was a light in the middle of it as well. This led to a series of sightings by many locals and officers in Belgium, but the main event that most people know about was on March 30th, 1990. On this date, radar detected an unknown object in the air, so 2 Belgian Air Force F-16s ended up scrambling due to this object, but they failed to confirm any sight of the object. Apparently, when it was first spotted, the object was moving at an incredibly fast speed and in a way that no flying object at the time could do. This picture here was well known to be the evidence or a picture of the Belgian UFO wave, but it was later discovered to be a hoax. So it was made from a styrofoam model, but lots of people used this as evidence for the Belgian UFO wave for years. I think it was recently that it was discovered to be a hoax, like this UFO picture thing. It was in the last 10-15 years or so. The strange thing here was that there were hundreds or even thousands of residents that claimed to see this triangular object, or even the lights up top, and it occurred for quite a while. Like, it was a 6-month period where all these residents would report this in, or they would speak to each other about it, and yet it didn't get a ton of national attention or international attention at the time. And there was obviously a ton of fear and concern over these events. Specifically, there were over 2,600 reports of sightings on this case, and thousands others who witnessed this and didn't file a report. Like, I don't know, if I saw this, would I file a report? And I'm just thinking about it, because you often hear like, oh, there was this many reports, and there was like 1,000 reports. Would you report this in if you saw this, or would you just be like, oh, wow, that's really strange, and then kind of go back inside your house? I don't know how I would feel. I guess it would depend, because if I saw one, I would probably take a picture or a video of it, but I don't know if I'd call the authorities about it, unless if it was something that was like really close by and right above me. But if it was from a distance, I would maybe be like, oh, it's just a trick of the eyes, maybe. There was 2,600 people that thought it was enough to report it in, though, so could this have been like some kind of UFO or something? Absolutely. Absolutely it could. The radar locks were later determined to be atmospheric phenomena, but I mean, come on, it's definitely a stranger case than that. So critics of the Belgian UFO wave just called it mass hysteria, due to the media, UFO organizations, and others really adding fuel to the fire. So who knows if this was really true or not. I'm also thinking it could have maybe been military testing as well, or I don't know. What do you think? Do you think this was just some kind of mass hysteria situation? I also want to do a quick note here. If anyone has ever experienced any of these events on this list, for example, this one or any upcoming cases that I'm talking about, can you please let me know in the comments below and let me know what your experience was? Because there obviously were a ton of witnesses to each of these events, besides maybe the Nuremberg sightings from the 1500s, but in terms of the more recent events, I'd love to hear your stories. This case is definitely one on the list that I think about a lot, as there were countless residents that witnessed this, and it was a sighting that was acknowledged by the government, the military, and even the police force. Also, unlike some of the previous cases I've discussed here, many of the witnesses described the exact same triangular craft and lights on the craft to almost the exact same detail. So it wasn't a situation where everyone had a different interpretation of how it looked. Most of the witnesses saw the exact same thing, which makes it even stranger. Also, these sightings were over a period of several months, so this changes it from simple hearsay to something definitely a lot stranger. Is it mass hysteria or something else? Maybe, but it's definitely strange, and it's worth looking more into. This is one of the more recent events that I'll cover in this video. The Phoenix Lights occurred on March 13th, 1997, across Arizona and Nevada. Specifically, there were two sightings that many residents saw. The first event was known as the Triangular Light Formation. At around 7:55 in the evening, witnesses described seeing a massive V-shaped flying object with lights around the edges. It was flying around and it eventually hovered above Henderson in Nevada. Initial reports state that there were 5 lights, but then the number went up to 9, and some reports even stated more than 9 lights, so who really knows? This craft would then make its way into Arizona, where it would be spotted by countless witnesses. Some have even said that this craft, or these lights at the time, were so close to the ground that the craft could be easily seen, and that the craft was absolutely humongous. And there's others that say it looked more like orbs or separate crafts flying in formation. So there were people who said that the craft was only around 100 feet above their heads, which would be unbelievably close for a craft that big. I'm saying craft a lot, am I? I don't know what, I think I've said it like 10 times in the last minute. But anyways, it's interesting. I think to see that 100 feet above my head, okay, that one I would report in. If I saw a craft that big, once again I'm saying craft, if I saw something that big above my head, I would have reported it in. I think so. Whatever it was, it apparently traveled southeast throughout the evening, and at around 10 p.m. at the same night, many people saw a row of bright hovering lights in the Phoenix area. Witnesses said that they saw V-shaped lights to descriptions of actual large, silent craft. So famous actor Kurt Russell, who was flying as a private pilot, he also reported seeing these lights to air traffic control that night, but he didn't think much of it at the time. That was until he started hearing more news coming out about the Phoenix Lights, and he remembered spotting it that night, but at the time he didn't really see it as some kind of craft or anything. It was just some strange lights in the sky, but he did report it in. Governor Fife Symington, who initially joked about the incident, later said he saw the Phoenix Lights and that it was otherworldly. Something really strange was that he had some kind of press conference or something, and he brought out someone dressed in an alien costume as a joke. But then later he said that he saw the event happen. Why would he do that then? Like, how? what's the reasoning? I don't understand this. Was he like covering it up, or was he trying to make light of the events, or did he witness it? I don't know. I honestly don't know. Yeah. Okay, anyways, let's continue. Analysis of the footage of the event measures the object at around 6,000 feet long, but that's pretty tough to determine. I mean, first of all, if it's a 6,000 foot long object, that's crazy. I don't think it could be possible. I mean, I guess it could be possible. Anything's possible, but that's huge. So I don't know. I'm not sure if I put too much faith in that measurement, but I mean, I guess it's possible. So because of the amount of media press and the amount of attention on this subject, ultimately the US Air Force claimed these sightings as training exercises, and the lights were simply the dropping of flares during the exercise. They also claimed that sightings were of the A-10 Thunderbolt II aircrafts flying in formation as part of Operation Snowbird. So this was a training program of the Air National Guard. But many remain skeptical of how true that actually is, especially witnesses who saw these crafts during that evening. I honestly have no idea here. One thing that's interesting though is that people started recognizing that once something strange happens in the sky, you get your camera and you point at the sky and see how it plays out. So we got some interesting footage of the events. You had news stations, locals, and officials all pull out their cameras and point up. The previous cases had this on a smaller scale, but by this period of time, more people had access to video cameras. And so now you start getting some really interesting footage of events like these. I'm not sure if it's something out of this world, but what I do know is that the formations are very strange, and there have been countless witnesses that, to this day, stand by the claims that the Phoenix Lights were more than just a training exercise. And maybe the drones today are something similar. Or is this all some cover-up for the aliens? I mean, honestly, who knows, right? Who knows? The last point I want to make here is that there are some that believe that the first set of lights in Nevada were strange activity, while the second set of lights in Arizona were military exercises. And so there are people that also separate the two events. Regardless, there are many that still stand by the fact that there is something stranger to the Phoenix Lights. What do you think? So we're going to end our cases by talking about the New Jersey drones. In New Jersey, and in many places in the United States, there have been sightings of several unmanned drones in the air at night. Initially, it started as some strange sightings, but news of this started just going crazy, and it was all over the news and social media. Eventually, government officials, locals, and influencers alike all started looking for and spotting these drones in the sky. These sightings began in early November, and they were really prominent over a period of 4 to 6 weeks. There were some really bizarre reports that came out, including these drones coming out of the ocean, or that they were the size of a bus. Also, there were reports that some of these drones were actually orbs, and they would move in really strange ways. Ultimately, this obviously led to a lot of panic, and you had people either jumping right into the alien conversation, or you had people saying that it's all mass hysteria, or even the government. Regardless, this whole case has been strange, and in all honesty, like I said earlier, a vast majority of these sightings were either planes, other people's drones flying in the air, government drones, and even stars and planets. If there are strange drone sightings in the air, people might just put their own drones up there, either to troll others or cause more issues. But I do agree that some of these sightings are definitely strange, and that has led these sightings to being kind of muddied by all these false sightings or this debunking, or even people just kind of going off the deep end and just assuming the craziest theories. So it's kind of just become this whole storm of misinformation in a way. But I do agree that some of these sightings are strange. And I think that anyone says that none of these sightings are strange, I don't know. I mean, some of them, if you watch the videos, they're odd. And I think one of the popular things these days is just like, hey, we're gonna say, no, it's all fake, or, oh, it's all real. But my whole thing, and when I talk about stuff like this, is that I'm not here to like debunk anything, or I'm not here to like say anything's 100% true. And I think having a position is nice to have. But when it comes to situations like these, I think it's more like, hey, let's look at this. Let's critically analyze it a little bit, and let's see what this is even about. And It doesn't mean we have to have an answer today of what it is. This reminds me a lot of the Colorado drone sightings in 2019 and 2020, where there were drones seen flying in grid formations in the evening. These sightings were also investigated by the government, but there hasn't really been a conclusion of who operated these drones, or even if they existed at all. Some reports have even denied the existence of the drones, even though there were countless witnesses. So yeah, based on history, maybe that will be the result of this one as well? Alright, so let's talk about this. Are these aliens? I mean, probably not. But it's definitely strange, and regardless of what they end up being, I'm sure people will have their own theories on the New Jersey drones in the years to come. I wonder if we'll see more of these drone sightings in other parts of the states in the years to come. It's already happened at least twice now, and so it's likely that it will happen again. My question is, what's gonna happen next? As we know, the New Jersey drones were definitely a strange time, and there's gonna be some stranger times ahead. We started off the video by discussing how UFOs and strange craft were seen as flying shields by the ancient Romans, God's wrath in 1500s Europe, mystery ships in the 1800s in the United States, to the 20th century UFO craze. And now we're talking about strange drones. What does this all mean? Like, are all these cases fake? Because all these different UFOs or crafts all look and act so different, and yet they are really similar in ways as well. You can just look at this as being the fact that as humans, we have always been fascinated by the stars. And every once in a while, something odd is seen up there. It doesn't mean it's a UFO, but our interpretation of whatever it is based on our cultural context and understanding of that specific era. And it seems as though these crafts, drones, or anomalies are connected to the cultures and beliefs of that time. But before we go, I just want to discuss one more idea. There's a famous technologist, computer scientist, and UFOologist named Jacques Vallée, and he discussed how these UFOs might just be a lot more than flying ships observing the planet, and why the perception of these crafts over time is constantly changing. That this phenomenon can adapt its appearance and behavior to influence human consciousness, societal norms, and the evolution of our culture and species. This has led to Jacques coining the term control system hypothesis. Jacques really goes in depth, and I recommend looking into his work if you enjoy this subject. But how I personally interpreted this hypothesis is that there is something that has been watching or observing humans for a long time. Some might call it a higher power, like God, others aliens, or even something or some being that is interdimensional or beyond our scope of understanding. But whatever that is, this sort of teacher or game master is providing these types of hints in order to facilitate or spark technological, social, or other changes to move us humans forward in their existence. And this game is just adjusted ever so slightly in order to challenge and help facilitate or influence change in the society it's in. So it's almost like this game master changing the style of the game based on who's playing, but the rules always stay the same. If you think about it, a lot of these mass sightings or strange occurrences happened before these significant changes in technology, belief systems, or cultural or societal evolution. Whether it's the birth, rebirth, or changes in religious and spiritual beliefs to technological evolution, there are many that feel as though there is an invisible hand guiding all of this. Is there something there? And is it pushing humans forward as we continue to evolve as a species? I mean, there definitely could be. But going back to the question, what are these crafts? Are they just nothing at all? Or are they something that is beyond our scope of understanding? Can they be something that is legitimately influencing the changes in society? And is there a deeper meaning to the existence of anything that we discussed in today's video? Or is it just nonsense, and did I waste your time? It's probably a bit of both. But it's definitely an interesting thought experiment and something that I want to continue to discuss further in the near future. Let me know if you want me to. To conclude, are these cases, including the case of the New Jersey drones, aliens, or UFOs? Until evidence is proven otherwise, we have to say no. But it's going to be interesting to see what these really are, or if we'll find out what they actually are in the near future. Who knows? By the time this video is out, maybe we'll already have our answer. Whether it's mass hysteria, the government, time travelers, or aliens, there's definitely been some strange things seen in the skies over the centuries. And as we discussed today, have similar events or incidents like the drones over New Jersey happened before? Yes. And will they happen again? Based on history, I can almost say with almost absolute certainty that yes, they will. It's definitely been a strange couple of months, and there's going to be some stranger times ahead. There are many hidden mysteries of our world, and so when we look into the skies, we aren't just looking at strange crafts, we're looking at our history. And whatever that history is something that remains unexplained to this day. Hopefully one day we'll have our answers, but for now, these mysteries remain unsolved. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. If you have any strange cases, just leave it in the comments below. I mean, I would love to kind of learn more about this as well. I'm kind of new in this sphere of understanding these types of kind of anomalies. And so, yeah, I mean, it would give me a reason to research it more. I'll be very excited to do so. So please let me know. And if you have any suggestions, leave that in the comments below as well. I really appreciate all of your continued support. And I don't know where this channel is going to go. I have no idea, but I'm just kind of just going along for the ride. We'll see how it goes. So thank you so much again. And as always, never stop wondering.